Hello, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Buckchester. You know what I want to do on the show. I want to enlighten you. I want to inspire you. I want to empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today, we want to get you fired up about science, faith, and plain old good living. We're talking about the book Full Circle, A Witness to Healing Through Science, Faith, and Just Plain Living. And the author is Judith Stickler. Others will be calling her Judy today. That's right. I love it. I love it. Who doesn't want to just have a great sense of self? Who doesn't want to make sure that they are living their best life? I know that I want to live my best life, and I know that you do too. Let me tell you just a little bit more about Judy. She was born in 1943 in Massachusetts. She remembers her idyllic childhood until the age of 9, when something unfortunately took her innocence, and I'll let her talk a little bit more about that. It completely changed her relationship with her parents and her siblings, especially at such a young age. Now, fast forwarding through her life, she was married at the age of 19. After completing 1 year of college, Judy had 2 children, Karen and Peter, whom she raised as a single mother after her divorce at the age of 29. She worked to support her family after her divorce, and she has received no financial support from her ex-husband after 1 year. Fast forwarding through, after graduation and 3 years working as an investment banker on Wall Street, she had her breakdown. She returned to her job after a 5-month leave of absence and was fired 18 months later. But she secured another job with an investment banker as clients, where they worked in a variety of positions for over 20 years. She left that firm having risen to the position of managing director in the year 2002. Judy retired after 5 years as administrator at Christ Church Episcopal Cathedral in 2009 and became a snowbird, spending 4 months in Litchfield, Connecticut, and 8 months in Sarasota, Florida, where she met her husband of 5 years, Dan Stickler. Now you know what I'm about to say. Go on, get comfy, get cozy, because we are about to get started. Thank you so much, Judy, for joining me on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I love it. You know, the title of your book is so intriguing, Full Circle. And I love how when we have a moment to look back over our lives, we do see how things come around full circle. But before we talk about that, I want to talk a little bit about how you became the person that you are. Unfortunately, I kind of touched on a little bit about an incident that happened to you as a child. So, if I may, what experiences in your childhood helped to lay the foundation for you as far as healing and living your best?
Well, I was very lucky in that I was born to parents who were loving and in a strong and healthy marriage. My parents were both Christians, and my mother especially shared a lot of her wisdom and her teachings with me as a child throughout my growing up. I also admired the relationship my parents had with each other and wanted one like it for myself. And I found that in my next-door neighbor, Joey, who was just a perfect friend and best friend and puppy lover. We had a spiritual, emotional, and physical relationship. I shared my first kiss with him in front of all the neighborhood children when I was about 4. And we used to lie on the hillside and look at the clouds and make shapes out of the clouds. And we had a tremendously imaginative relationship. I also used to exercise my imagination when I would read, quote unquote, the Sunday comics. I couldn't read yet, but I made up the stories to go with the pictures, and I would listen to the radio and make up the pictures to go with what I was hearing from the radio. So I had an active imagination, and I think that openness was really very instrumental in my later ability to heal. I also was a pleaser as a child, and I used to want to please my parents all the time, and I was a very obedient child with my father, who was quite a strong authority figure. And I think that I learned to respect authority in the form of doctors and other experts in their fields, and turn to them for help when I needed it. And that was pretty critical also.
Now, who were the most critical healers in your journey? And I think that you've kind of started along that line a little bit. And how were they alike, or how were they different? Did you find that there was a particular role model or a particular type of person that you were drawn to, or were you able to find that different people provided a different aspect of assistance along the journey called life?
Well, there were two principal healers, I would say. After my breakdown, I was in the hospital for 5 weeks after the breakdown, and I needed to have a psychiatrist in order to be released from the hospital, and I chose a doctor who was working with another patient at the time in that same hospital, and I liked his last name. His name was Dr. Gold. I thought that was pretty important. Yeah, and he was I fired all the residents who I saw up until the time I met with him, because I just didn't trust that they really knew what they were doing. But Dr. Gold seemed to be very professional. He was experienced, and I liked his style. He was very disciplined in the way he approached the hour, and I just resonated with him. So he was an important healer. I don't know if your listeners know what a transference is, but often patients tend to fall in love with their doctors. Well, that's not the kind of relationship I had, or the kind of transference I had with him. I actually was acting out my fear and my rage at him from the trauma I had experienced. I was raped when I was 9 by a trusted neighbor, and so my parents dealt with it by telling me to forget it. This was the 50s, and people were not very well educated at the time about how to deal with things like this. So they told me to forget it, which I did, and it turned out that I blocked the memory. And so I had a lot of rage and a lot of fear within me, but I didn't really have much access to it. So in the course of my therapy with Dr. Gold, I pushed him away. I didn't allow him to get close to me. I spoke truth to power, and so forth and so on with him. And it was just what I needed, and he was okay with it. So that was very important. The other healer who was really very instrumental was my priest at the Episcopal church I was attending at the time. It was a woman priest, and she was just what I needed. She also would not allow me to become dependent on her, which I didn't allow myself to become with Dr. Gold. I kept my distance from him, and she made sure that I kept my distance from her. And in the space between us, that's where the Holy Spirit, I think, did a lot of work. And she was just terrific. She helped me with some major insights. She told me once when I was experiencing tremendous fear and anxiety after 9/11. I was living in New York. I was working in New York City at the time, and I lost a number of colleagues in that tragedy. And so I was experiencing a lot of anxiety, and she said, think of Jesus as freedom from fear. And that was very helpful to me at the time. And she said other things like that I'll never forget because they were so instrumental in helping me grow and get stronger and healthier.
I love how God places different people along our path at different times in order to help us, to assist us, to confirm things for us, to help to be like a guide so many times in the things that we're doing, to let us know or confirm that, yes, I hear your prayers, or yes, I see what you're doing, and you're going in the right direction. Just those wonderful confirmations that He gives to us along our way. I love it. And you said a mouthful there with 9/11. I can only imagine the New Yorkers at the time, just the trauma that those that were very close by experienced. We have a family member that was affected as well, so I do know how some people feel. But being there in New York, my goodness, I can only imagine. So yes, my heart and my prayers still go out to those that were affected, especially when that time of year comes around. I can imagine.
It's really interesting because New York is a city of materialism and wealth and greed and all those other things, as well as the beauty of the arts and so forth. But at the time of 9/11, the churches and the synagogues and the mosques were packed with people. Yeah. People were just drawn to their faith and the people who shared their faith with them, and found great comfort and consolation. My son's best friend was lost. He was working on the 102nd floor of one of the towers, and it was just tragic. And he was Jewish, and so there was a service at his synagogue, and it was packed. It was standing room only. And I think that all the services and all the churches and houses of worship experienced that kind of importance to people. I mean, they really served a tremendous purpose.
And it really and truly is amazing, because I found that in that moment that it didn't matter almost what your faith was, or what your denomination or what your religious affiliation was. We really kind of came together as a nation, and we just wanted that collective hug to say, I'm here. As a fellow citizen, we are here to love and support you however we can. And it was a definitely a tragic moment that has happened, but the beauty of the love that I think that the citizens coming together.
We all hoped it would last.
Yes. We really did. And even being in California, we did vigils on the anniversaries, because we wanted everyone to know, it's like we have not forgotten, what has happened, and we're still trying to have that love. And boy, it seems like there's only certain times of the year that we get that. Christmas is one of those times. Thank God, that's a positive time that we try to come together and love on each other. But tragedy does have a way of bringing people together, and I'm glad we were able to come together in that moment.
Me too.
Judy, it is almost time for us to go to break, but before we do, could you please remind everyone, what is the title of your book where can we pick up a copy, and how do we stay in contact with you?
The title of my book is Full Circle, A Witness to Healing Through Science and Faith and Just Plain Living. It's by Judith Radasch, and that's how to search for it on Amazon. It's available in paperback and ebook format. And you can contact me at jradasch@me.com.
Alrighty, everyone. Now you know where you can pick up a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this.
Anne, Camilla, William, and Fred. The four in the Humvee are on a perilous journey, halfway across the country to a tent city near the Mississippi River, a long ways from Boston. Through each bend and turn, they meet some people in need and others who have evil in their souls. Four unlikely heroes in a Humvee on an unlikely trip, the recipe for a captivating story. Grab this book, EMP Casualty by Michael Kravitz.
Discovery. No, just a sec.
What would it look like if we listened more? Could the right voice, the right set of words, bring us all just a little closer? Get us to open up, even push us further? It could, if we took the time to listen. The most inspiring minds, the most compelling stories. Download Audible and listen for a change.
Hi everyone, Dr. Angela here. Did you know that Daily Spark is now on Facebook? That's right, you can visit with me at facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I want to know more about what you're thinking. I'd love to know which interview did you find the most entertaining or the most informative. I want to talk to you, and I want you to be able to talk to me. Simply visit facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Tester. My guest today is Judith Radasch Stickler, and I am so excited to be talking to her about her book, Full Circle, A Witness to Healing Through Science, Faith, and Just Plain Living. I love it. That's right, just plain living. Hey, we all need to live our best life, and we need to know how to do that. And I think that that's what we're going to help you with today. So, Judy, I want to ask you this question. With your journey of healing, with all that you have been able to experience and share with others, the give and take that we have with the various relationships that we have in our lives, why do you think that your journey has taken the time, be it that you think it's a short time or a long time, but why do you think that your journey has taken the time that it has?
Well, I think when you're 9 and you suffer a severe trauma, as I did, you build up defenses that enable you to cope and live in the world. And in my case, the world was filled with men and I was scared to death of them. So the defenses I put in place were pretty powerful. The first one was built after my mother told me to forget about the experience, and I blocked the memory. But that really wasn't enough. I needed to also develop some other defenses that enabled me to be comfortable in my environment, which included boys and men and so forth. And so I built up a number of unhealthy defenses to help me do that. And it they led me to great successes in every area of my life except for relationships with men, which is not surprising. So when something is really working well for you, it gets better and better and better. So my unhealthy defenses became very strong. And it wasn't until I found myself in the highly competitive environment of Wall Street that they were not strong enough to withstand the stress of that experience and broke down. And that's when I had my breakdown. But I was 39 at that time, so I had been living for 30 years after that trauma, as I said, quite successfully. So it took me, because I didn't take time out to get healthy per se. I continued to work because I had children to support and educate, and I just had to keep living my life. I saw my psychiatrist in the beginning twice a week and for years and years, and I took psychotropic drugs and to deal with the anxiety because I never wanted to go back into the hospital again. And so it was 26 years of therapy and deepening my faith before I was actually healed. And ironically, I was completely healed, which is not very common for somebody who suffers a trauma at such a young age. But I stuck with it. I had my goal was to be able to behave instinctively, not to have to think about everything. And so I got to the point where I was able to do that, and then I knew that my healthy defenses had built up and taken the place of the other ones, and I was going to be able to enjoy the rest of my life.
And that is such a milestone, to be able to know I can enjoy my life after having dealt with everything along the way. I love how you said that you were busy surviving for the past.
Yes.
If you just didn't have the time to deal with the hurts and the pains and figuring out the lefts and the rights and all of that, you had to live. You had to, I totally understand. Now, speaking of healing and your faith, were there any particular moments where you felt that your faith especially helped you, or were there ways that you felt that God was really talking to you in that particular moment?
Well, I used to attend adult education at my church on Sundays, and the woman priest, who I described as one of my pivotal healers, was very skillful at leading those discussions. And I have to say that I was a math person. I loved numbers because they were relationships in relationship, but they were also safe. They did not threaten me in any way. So symbols and numbers were key to me. So the cross was a symbol, and it was a symbol of wholeness, and it was a symbol of suffering. And in many ways, the cross was important in my overall psyche. I don't think I used the concept in any particular way. It just was present in my thinking. And the Trinity was really instrumental. I remember thinking about the Trinity as a channel within me. And God the Father was my mind, and God the Son was my body, and God the Holy Spirit was my soul. And but I could not get the Jesus piece, as I called it, into alignment with God and the Holy Spirit, so it would be an open channel through which God could flow through me. And I remember saying to my priest, I just can't get the Jesus piece in. And that's when she said, think of Jesus as freedom from fear. Well, it wasn't until I realized that Jesus was both human and divine that I was able to fix that problem. Jesus, the human, signified to me too much of what was associated with my trauma, whereas Jesus, the divine, could easily slip right into that channel. And I went to a retreat once with some women in the church, and it was right around the time of 9/11, and it was for women who had been sexually abused as children in one way or another. And the leaders of the retreat brought a Jesus doll with them, and they brought it into the room, and I became so anxious. I told them they had to take it away. I couldn't stand to have it in the room with me. And fortunately they understood and they removed the doll, but it wasn't, it was Jesus, the divine Jesus, that was helpful to me. And so the Trinity was very instrumental. And I read the writings of Richard Rohr. He's a Catholic Franciscan priest. He writes daily meditations, and I read those every day. And he pictures the symbol of the Trinity as a triangle with rounded corners, and the flow from the Father to the Son to the Holy Ghost and back to the Father, open and receiving. Every member of the Trinity open and receiving. And that's just such a lovely image for me and has been very helpful. And I was able to basically accept God within me after I was able to come to terms with the Trinity. So that was very critical. Another sticking point for me was the virgin birth. I just, given my experience, I had a lot of trouble, and you can imagine how I thought Mary had gotten pregnant with Jesus. Well, I remember saying to this 90-year-old member of our congregation, I just can't accept the virgin birth. And he said, Judy, with God, everything is possible. And, I was just able to let go of that. Yeah. Just let go of it and accept it.
Just like that.
And move on. I mean, it was just like that. And that's how people of faith can show God to other people of faith. And I think he was really doing that for me. And then the final, now this is really kind of unusual, I guess, but the final aspect of my healing that was related to symbolism of the church was after I had taken the Trinity within myself, there was no room anymore for this evil spirit. And I had, for a long time in my therapy with my psychiatrist, told him that I needed to have a visual memory of that experience before I felt I could be fully healed. So I was driving home from my session in the city. At the time I was living in Connecticut, Litchfield, Connecticut. And all of a sudden, in my mind's eye, there was kind of like a void with stars, and Satan emerged into my vision, my mind's eye. And I killed him. I said, get away from me. And he died and he went away, and then he came back 20 minutes later, and I said, I renounce you, get away from me, don't ever come back. And he left, and he's never come back. So I think living within my psyche was this evil experience that had over the years taken on the image of Satan. And I was able to bring it into my conscious mind in that form and expel it. And that was when my boundaries came back into place, and I knew that I was completely healed.
I mean,
that's a little weird, isn't it? But but it's what happened.
Well, talking to a therapist, no, it's not weird. It's not weird at all. I have many clients that have very similar stories. It's just how it manifests for you, how you are able to understand it and interpret it, and what do you need to do in order to have the closure. And it was appropriate and true for you. And that's what's important, is that you in that moment said, nope, it's done. It's over. It will never be alive and real in my life again. I am done with this. And you were able to close the book on that chapter. And from what I hear, that the freedom that you were given in that moment and the gift of the freedom in that moment. So many times people who haven't been through something that they need to be freed of or from, they don't understand. And I tell people, it's like, you know, if you can imagine if someone were sitting on you or laying on top of you, if you could picture being on the bottom of that pile up on the football field, and then eventually everyone gets up, that release of pressure, and you're like, oh, thank God, I can get up now and I can go about my life. That's what so many people feel about what they have been through. So yes, I do understand. I really do, and I think there are so many people that are, as they're listening, they're probably nodding their heads too, saying, yeah. Anyone who that needed to be free from any type of addiction, or perhaps you were doing something in your life and you know that you're not supposed to do that something, and you were able to stop doing that particular something through God's faith, through your faith in God and help, then let me tell you, I know there's people out there saying, yep, Judy, we did it. I definitely understand. I do. Now, believe it or not, it is time for us to go to break. I love it when I'm having great conversation with my guests because the time seems to fly. But I want to, before we go to break, if you could please, Judy, please remind everyone, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And how do we stay in contact with you?
The title of my book is Full Circle, A Witness to Healing Through Science and Faith and Just Plain Living by Judith C. Radasch. It's available if you search Full Circle by Radasch on Amazon in paperback and ebook form. And to get in contact with me, you can write me at my email address, which is jradasch@me.com.
Alrighty, listeners, now you know where you can pick up a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for spending your time with me here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am Dr. Angela Buckchester. My guest today is Judy Radasch, and she has written the book Full Circle, A Witness to Healing Through Science, Faith, and Just Plain Living. I love the title of that book. And we all just want to live our best. I know that I do, and that's why my goal is to, say it with me, enlighten, inspire, and empower you to be your best self. So, Judy, I want to ask you, and I tend to ask this of my author guests, why did writing this particular book, why was this important to write it now, to get it out?
Well, I really had already healed by the time I started to write the book. But I felt called to witness to my healing, and I felt the best way for me to do that was to write a memoir and focus on the healing itself. And so that's what inspired me to write the book. I found it took me about 4 years altogether because I had never written a book before, but I found that I would have bursts of writing, and then it would sit for days or weeks sometimes before the critical mass would come together and I'd have another burst. And when I did have one of those bursts, I would just sit at my computer and the words would flow. I didn't even think much about it. I just wrote whatever came into my mind. And it was almost like the Holy Spirit was talking through me and I was just putting it down on the page. It was easy to do, and I felt that it was worth sharing.
Mm-hmm. And you know, it's quite interesting. I love how you said that it was as though Holy Spirit were speaking through you. And so many times I have found that when it's time to do a particular something or say a particular something, when it is a true time and it's not yourself, you know, it's not ego or it's not pride or anything getting in the way, but it is truly the correct moment, it is so easy and it just kind of flows. And if you step away, like you get out of your own way and just allow Holy Spirit to flow in that moment, you end up with such a beautiful creation. I have to agree with you on that one. Now, how did you know that you and Dan were right for each other? How did you know that you were healed enough to be in this relationship?
Well, I was married, as you mentioned, at 19 and divorced at 29. And then for 42 years, I was single. I was a single mother, and then I was a single person living and working in New York City and not really having time for a relationship or, frankly, interest or need for a relationship. But when I retired and came down to Sarasota, Dan and I were introduced by mutual friends. I was not looking for anybody. I hadn't asked my friends to be on the lookout for me or anything. They just somehow knew that the two of us might get along. And so we met for lunch and interviewed each other and discovered actually that we had many things in common, even though we had extremely different backgrounds. He thought of me as a Yankee, and he himself was from West Virginia and grew up in a little coal mining town in Barrackville, West Virginia. And but we had traveled from our ends of the polar opposites towards the middle, and we met and found that we even had some work experiences in common. But we both love to travel, and we both love to play golf, and I found that, before I left Sarasota after we met in the spring to spend the summer up there, I thought, he's just too good a man for me to be away from for the whole summer. And so I invited him to come up for a week, and he did. But before he came up, I began to experience anxiety and some fear about the fact that I had not shared my past with him, and I felt that I should do that before he came. And so I called him, and in fear and trembling, I told him parts of my story, not the whole story, because that would take too long, but I told him parts of my story, and he listened. He listened really attentively. And I don't remember what he said, but whatever he said, it was the right thing, because by the end of the conversation, I felt comfortable. I felt relaxed. The anxiety had subsided. So he came. We had a great time. He met my kids, and my kids liked him, and he liked my kids, and he met my friends, and my friends liked him, and they became our friends, and we just really enjoyed each other. Now, when I moved back at the end of the summer, I moved in with him, which kind of was a surprise to him. And a little bit to me too, but I thought, I'm in my 70s, Angela. Right. I'm not in my 50s or 60s. I'm in my 70s, and he was in his 70s at the time, and Carpe Diem became my motto. And I just thought, we don't have a lot of time left, either one of us, and we should make the most of it. So I moved in with him. And but in the beginning, I didn't really feel that I belonged. Probably partly because he hadn't invited me to move in with him. I just moved in with him, and so I was really uncomfortable. And he had been single for 4 years. His wife had been killed in a tragic accident. She was turning across a highway and a tractor-trailer truck hit her car and turned it into an accordion, and she died instantly. Yeah. So he'd been single for 4 years, and he had really come to be quite comfortable in his bachelorhood. And so he didn't want change. You know, change is hard for some people, and it was hard for him. So this was hard for him, and it was hard for me. But I decided to go see a psychologist and talk with her about it and see if I could get past this feeling of anxiety that had reared its ugly head, this lack of belonging. And so she said, well, what would make you feel comfortable? And I talked about all the stupid little things, you know, like getting rid of a couch that had no reading light and was facing his back in the den, and replacing it with a recliner that had a reading light and was facing him in the den, and getting I was sleeping in the guest bedroom at the time, getting a dresser for my stuff and emptying out the closet in that room so I could put my stuff in there, and so forth and so on. And he listened. So I came home from the session, and he said, how did it go? And I said, well, it went fine. I'm not one to open up too much about things like that. I said it went fine. And he said, well, what did you talk about? And so I told him, and I pulled out the list we had made, and I read him the list of the things that would make me feel comfortable. And he accepted every one of them except for one, which was not really important. And so I knew, number one, that he listened, and I knew, number two, that he was willing to change to accommodate me. And and when I was a child and I had wanted something, my parents either ignored me or dismissed me, or they had other things that they and so I'd learned not to know what I wanted. So this was really quite new for me, and it really felt good. So that was another indicator. He's also a man of great faith, and that was important. And we are both fair fighters. And I didn't know that I had become a fair fighter because I hadn't been in a relationship where I'd had any fights. But we did have a few. He's a very strong man, and he's fair and I'm fair. And so that really was important and a good thing to know. And so I knew that I could trust him. My son, who is sober now 30 years, recovering alcoholic, said to me a long time ago, Mom, trust is a decision. And I learned that I could trust Ann. So that was really very important. And we had agreed when we met that neither one of us wanted to get married. But after being together for 3 years, we got married, and we just celebrated our 5th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. So,
I love how you both changed your minds. At least you both agreed that it was, okay, well, we made a decision. We both changed our minds. New decision. Let's get married. I love it. I love it. You know, but
well, we're both reasonably flexible about things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's important, I think.
Some really important things there, and that is one with being a fair fighter. So many times that is a complaint that I get, especially when I'm talking to couples, is that, Dr. Isla, she or he, depending on, who's telling the story, the other person uses stuff from 15 years ago, or they're holding me accountable for stuff that I didn't even know I was being, judged up against this particular thing. That's not fair. And to be able to, and it's like, did you know that this was a rule? They're like, no, I had no idea this was a rule. But the other person has been mad at them for 5 years, but never told them, why or what the expectation was to even give them an option or an opportunity to live up to the expectation, or perhaps to not live up to the expectation. So that is really important. That's because I can see someone going, wait a minute, a famous fighter? What does that mean? What is that? Yeah, I want to be one of those. And you had
well, you know what I learned how to do? I learned how to basically speak from within myself, like, that makes me feel sad, or that really upsets me, instead of, why did you do that? In other words, rather than focusing on the other person, I learned to focus on how I was feeling and what that was doing to me. And I learned that through a combination, mostly from the church, I think, because I worked in the church for the last 5 years of my career at the Christ Church Cathedral in Hartford, and I learned that from some of the priests there, and it really makes all the difference. It really does.
Absolutely, it really does, and I tell people, you don't have to have a major something to have a therapist as well. Sometimes you just need someone that you know that you can trust, that you can open up to, that you can vent to, that will be there and create that safety zone for you, but will also be open and honest and guide you and help you be the best you that you can be. And everything that you have said there is so important. So many times we think that the person is purposefully on the attack with us. And I have told so many people, I said, what if by default you said the person didn't mean to harm me, as opposed to this person was trying to harm me? How would that change the outcome? How would that change what happened if the person did it accidentally? And to see the light bulb go off, or just to see someone go, well, I never thought that it could be I never thought that it actually had been an accident. And it's like, oh my goodness. So yeah, it's amazing what we can find out about each other when we simply talk. And I hate that our talk is over. We are at the end of the show. So Judy, let me tell you, I have enjoyed so much spending time with you, and I really think that our listeners today have, that they've learned a lot, that we all kind of sat down and had coffee together, if you will, and had a good old chat at the table.
Yes.
So thank you.
Well, it was a pleasure for me as well. It was a real pleasure. I enjoyed it a great deal. And I hope it is helpful to some people.
I think it will be. I really and truly think that it will be. Thank you so much. So last time, if you would please, before we conclude the show, if you could remind everyone, title of your book, where can we pick up a copy, and how do we get in contact with you?
Okay, it's Full Circle, A Witness to Healing Through Science and Faith and Just Plain Living by Judith C. Radasch. You can search for it on Amazon, Full Circle by Radasch. It's available in paperback and ebook format, and you can reach me at jradasch@me.com.
Thank you again, Judy, for being on the show with me today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And listeners, thank you as well for tuning in and spending another day with us here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. And as always, may the Lord continue to shine His face upon you May you receive His grace and His mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, be blessed in the Lord. Bye-bye.